Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the Doug and Fur Show. We also want to encourage anybody who is logging on and signing on and watching this. At this moment, we have our phone number down at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to call in. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. We're going to not talk about necessarily a concept, but we are going to talk about headline news. We have a couple things in the works that we're going to kind of try to do in not an entire news feed, but or a news cycle, but we're gonna talk about some current events that are happening right now, and not just one, but a couple in particular. The first one on today's agenda. Wait, my partner in truth is gonna help me with this, and his name
Yeah, I
is.
was about to say you missed that. No, start it again. I'm just kidding. I'm Fernando, and this is Doug.
Yes.
Welcome to the Doug and Fur Show. I feel weird doing an intro. I don't normally do the intro.
But we are gonna start off talking about inflation. And I just wanted to bring up that, and you tell me, we'll start off with that. I want to hear your perspective on inflation. We are experiencing inflation. Potentially, we will see hyperinflation very soon. And I just want to talk about that here a little bit.
Like, the reason I wanted to talk about inflation is because I just went to the gas station the other day, and
Right.
I filled my tank for, like, almost $50, and I used to fill it for, like, 20-something. I'm lucky enough to share BJ's account with some of my family members, so we get gas cheaper, and gas was $3.11 here in Coral Springs,
Right.
and in the Fort Lauderdale area, and then in some other gas stations I drove by, $3.39, $3.40,
Right.
and I was like, wow, this is crazy, this is ridiculous.
Right.
And gas isn't the only thing that's going up. It's food. I know at all restaurants, the prices of food has been going up. Groceries, eating your everyday items that you need. It's just everything is inflating way out of proportion in the last 2 years, last
Right.
year.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think specifically like since the beginning of this year is when it's mostly been happening. I know a lot of companies have changed their policy starting in January. So
Right.
So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, so inflation is not something that doesn't happen. Actually, one of the best things for an economy and for a country is to experience 2% inflation on an annual basis.
2%.
2%. And that is to encourage the public of that country to invest their money. Not just to save it, because they know that over the course of 20, 30 years, if you just save it, it will be worth less. The encouragement is to get people to invest. And that's a good thing, because that makes for a wealthier society. It kind of pushes and gives us an incentive to take risk. So we do want to see some inflation in an economy, in a country. We want to see some. Now, once you get to the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% inflation, that's when it starts to become a problem where, the inflation starts to outpace the wages. Because when we invest our money, we don't just save it. That makes us all wealthier. Everything, regardless if people want to believe it or not, trickle-down economics is a real thing. When the very rich invest their money, we all get wealthier. When middle-class people like me and you invest their money, everybody gets wealthier, all the way down to the poor. Yes, the rich get richer in a faster way, but it does trickle down.
The rich get richer, but so do we.
Right, exactly. And I would even argue that we can just look from the standpoint that we look at monarchs and kings from 500-600 years ago, and today our poor live better than them. They have AC, they have running water,
Yeah.
they have the access to multiple types of food from all over the world. They have Amazon, things from all over the world that can be delivered right to
Yeah,
their
just
doorstep.
technology, right?
All those things are on the backs of a capitalist system, and that happens, when we're all encouraged to invest. And inflation is a big part of that.
So
I just wanted to say real quick. So
Yeah,
when
go
we gain to be a wealthier society, wages are things that, as a byproduct, go up, but they're staying ahead of inflation. The problem is once you get past 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%, the inflation now outpaces the wages, and real wages, actual buying power, becomes less.
exactly, and what's the inflation on gas, right? It's almost 50%.
Right.
So it's just simple math, right? It was like at $1.90 like 2 years ago, and
Right.
now it's like at $3.30.
Right.
So and the funny thing what you were mentioning about wages is, if the inflation happens faster than the wages, then you get more poverty,
Right.
right? Because now wages aren't able to keep up.
Right.
And then you have policies to raise the minimum wage. It doesn't raise all wages, by the way. It just raises the minimum wage to
Right.
$15 an hour. And that does absolutely nothing.
Right.
Because we didn't double the minimum wage. It was more like a 40 something percent wage increase.
Right.
And then who cares? Everything is double the price anyway.
Right.
So it did absolutely nothing. And not only that, but now only minimum wage went up, but everyone else is still getting paid the same or less. People are taking pay cuts now.
Right.
For nothing, because now the inflation is way higher. So it's like that's not how you solve an economic crisis.
No.
Just
not
by
at all.
printing more money.
No. And there have been other countries that have tried this. Zimbabwe is a really great example. Venezuela is another really great example. When you just fire up the printing press, that actually makes you more impoverished. Money is only worth something when we have faith in it. And we typically have faith in things that take a lot of human effort to get.
Yeah.
That's just gives you a quick example. Why is gold valuable? I can't eat it. We can do things with it now. It's in our computers. It's in things that we use on a day-to-day basis. But gold has been inherently valuable before that. Gold has always been something that was very valuable to human beings. And why is that? Gold is that it's hard to get and there's a limited supply.
Mm-hmm.
Gold would be worthless if, for instance, we found gold under,
They grew on trees.
Right. If it started growing trees, it would not be worth anything. And that's the same thing. We have faith in our dollar because there's a limited supply. When you start inflating that supply and you start cranking it out, it becomes worth less and less.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense to anybody who thinks like, why don't we just print more money, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, it's paper. That's why, like, paper is useless. Dollars are useless. They're only useful because people are willing to exchange things. And it's just like crypto.
Right.
I think the only good thing that has come from this whole inflated economy is actually inflation of crypto. And as a side effect, because no one has faith in the dollar anymore,
Right.
no one has faith in the economy, so they buy crypto. So that's good.
Right.
That's good for investors like you and I and anyone else who decides to get into that market.
Right.
But it's just funny that wasn't on purpose. Like,
Right.
the whole idea was to make the American economy stronger, and it's gotten significantly worse.
Right. And I do want to briefly talk about this because I do want to be fair. There can be upsides if you are smart when it comes to an inflationary cycle. And this is typically the rich and the middle class if you have disposable income is
Invest.
basically what I'm saying. If you are poor, which we'll get to in a minute, this is how inflation doesn't really affect everybody evenly. It actually disproportionately affects the poor. Because if you have disposable income, you're not, living paycheck to paycheck. You can invest your money, and you can actually make a great deal of profit. Also, if you already own a home, it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to pay off because you have a fixed rate and a lower interest rate. Now, that can be actually a good thing for certain people because I do want to be fair to those arguments where people say, oh, inflation is good and inflation is the goal. Yes, there can be good things for middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy people if you are smart, and I don't want to take that away.
Yeah, but overall...
Well, overall, we want to talk about the poor. The overwhelming majority of Americans are making less than $40,000 a year. You're in the top 20% in the United States if you're making $100,000 combined income.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea, 80% of our population combined income, household income, is making less than $100,000 a year. That, so just to give you an idea, the overwhelming majority of people are not, extremely wealthy in this country. So you're disproportionately affecting an overwhelming majority of people.
Yeah. No, and eating to the middle class, right? Like,
Right.
It helps in that sense, in the sense of investing, right? So, like, I wish I would have gotten another home before this housing market blew up, right? Because now that would be worth a lot more.
You personally, you're
Yes,
saying?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
I wish I would have invested more in crypto in January or in December of last year, before all of this happened. And I didn't. So, yes, it does help in that sense. But even when you take that money out, right?
Right.
You take out your money that you invested, you pay off the home, you take out your crypto money.
Right.
Everything that you want to buy is 2 or 3 times the cost of what it used to be.
Right.
Sure, you've made a lot of money, which is good, but you have to have hope that what inflated, so the price of housing and the price of crypto and anything else that you invested in,
Right.
you have to hope that it inflated more than the economy.
Right.
Because otherwise, if it inflated at the same rate or less, then who cares if you made money? Everything costs more anyway.
Right. And that is true too. And yes, that's also a risk. and I was just kind of trying to give the side of
Yeah, no,
why
yeah.
inflation is good. I don't think it's good. I'd actually want to see us actually go back to the gold standard, a fixed standard where there's a limited supply that we are tied to, so we can't really inflate, but we don't do that anymore. But the biggest problem with inflation is this hurts the poor. Disproportionately, it's essential goods that skyrocket in price. Gas is one of them. Foods, eggs, our basic foods like eggs and wheats and stuff like that. These things disproportionately get inflated, and that disproportionately hurts the lower and the poor class in this country. And I think that, you know, I think that this country has a duty to do something about it, and I don't think it's in the form of wealth redistribution, but wealth opportunity. And inflation is not a wealth opportunity. And that's why I like to see us on more of a fixed standard as opposed to the standard that we have now, where it's tied to our economy. Our dollar fluctuates; it's not held to the gold standard anymore. And now the Fed basically has every ability to just print money, as much as it wants, freely as it wants, and that becomes very, very extremely detrimental
And
to a majority in this country.
when they start trying to regulate cryptos, when it's really going to go downhill, because then crypto will lose value as well.
Right.
Everybody's
right.
going to sell, which I think happened in China.
Right.
If you have any thoughts on inflation and the current economy and how crazy the prices of everything is, give us a call and let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have any ideas of, just anything you want to share about that.
Right.
But we did speak on China, so why don't we move on to our next topic?
Yeah. So speaking of China, just they're a totalitarian, dictator state. Whether some people want to say that they have free market values, they do have some free market values to a point. They don't have freedom of speech. They do not have private property, and they're actually currently moving more and more in the direction of totalitarianism.
They don't have internet, by the way. I mean, they have internet, but they don't have access to our internet. They have their own China internet,
right,
and their own Google and all that stuff.
Right. Yes.
So
and
just if you want to get an idea.
Yes, and they even try every year. The Xi Jinping bans cryptocurrency because that is a way more stable, even though it's volatile.
Volatile, yeah.
Volatile. It is way more stable than their currency because they do inflate their currency over and over again, and they don't really care about the poor.
No, and if every Chinese started to invest their money in crypto, that would be bad for their government and their control. They don't have control of the population anymore, so
they have no need for their own currency.
Literally,
and that would give the government a whole lot less. Because then the true currency that people would be trading with would be in private hands.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good thing, and even good for every country.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I can't imagine what it's like to live in a country where you can only do what the government allows you to do, and you can't do anything else. You have basically no freedom.
Right.
I know it's worse in North Korea, obviously.
It's worse than North Korea?
No, it's worse in North Korea.
Oh, yes. I was going to say, I think that hands down, you are more free in China than you are in North Korea.
Yeah. But then you have a free state like Hong Kong.
Right.
And then China is basically promising to invade them and take them over. And that's the only free area in the China region left.
And just for people who don't know, Hong Kong, Shanghai, what's the one off the coast there? It's slipping my mind.
I don't know.
The island off the coast, Taiwan. These are several ex-European colonies. They are free states. These European colonies in the late 90s decided that it was right for them to give back these colonies rightfully to China. Now, what happened these colonies were free market societies. They were democracies. China is a communist country. So one of the things was that these people didn't want to go under communist regime, but they were okay basically being called China again. So what happened was that they created a two-party, one China, two systems. And basically these free ex-European colonies then basically were free states, but they were still protected by China's, military. They still paid a level of tax, but they still had private property. They had freedom of speech. They're basically their own countries, but they were kind of under this weird system that we've never really seen before. So Hong Kong was not China. Taiwan is not China. These are free states. And last year in 2020, when the world was distracted by coronavirus, China went in and took over Hong Kong completely. Hong Kong is not a free state anymore. It was took in by force by the Chinese military.
Yeah.
And now China is threatening Taiwan, which is an island off the coast of China. That, yes, is a part of that two systems, one China. And they're threatening that. And one of the things is that we have to understand that China is an adversary of the Western world. And when I say the Western world, I'm talking about Western democracies. I'm talking about European countries. I'm talking about Japan, Australia. Every place that you would basically want to live in this world, those are Western democracies that have Judeo-Christian values at their core, that have free market economies, that have freedom of speech, that have private property rights. China is a threat to these things. China stands in opposition of these things. China is our enemy, and I think that we need to talk about this missile, the hypersonic missile that they just launched and tested over the last couple of days.
In other words, like what you're saying is communism is the enemy of democracy.
Yes.
Right? And China currently personifies communism, and Western values the West, such as the United States, personifies democracy.
Right.
And that idea. So I just want to clarify, like, we're not saying people from China.
Right.
We're not saying people from America. We're talking about the government, the Chinese government, and the values for which they stand.
Right.
Same thing. So I'm not trying to, and Doug is not trying to say any sort of race superiority thing. It's a values thing that we're talking about here, and that's why we say China is an enemy of the United States. So it's the Chinese governmental values that are an enemy of American values.
Right.
And the fact that the reason we need to maintain military superiority is because if we don't, our values are threatened.
Right.
Right.
Our whole way of life is threatened.
Exactly, and just how they took over Hong Kong. I mean, they're not gonna invade us tomorrow.
Right.
But if our country keeps going downhill, in a downward spiral, and theirs keeps going up, in 50 years, our grandchildren could be facing a very serious threat.
A real threat, absolutely.
So this missile, hypersonic missile, I think it's an ICBM, if I'm not mistaken, which stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile.
Yes.
And it's a missile that can be launched from one place in the world, and it can travel to another continent. That's really why it's called intercontinental. Usually the way they work is they launch up into orbit, into space, and then they go around, move to their target, and then they descend and they drop a payload. Sometimes it can be a nuclear bomb, or it can be many other types of things, EMPs or anything like that, right? But this one in particular was so unique, or not unique, it was so concerning because it didn't go all the way up into space. It was suborbital, meaning that it could reach its target and strike. And I heard that it can instead of going through the north part where we have we have sites in Alaska to deter that.
Anti-missile sites.
Yeah, it can actually get around that and strike.
It can actually go directly from Hong Kong or Beijing directly to Los Angeles.
Yes, and
it doesn't have to go up into space where we could catch it and blow it up out in space. That's how typical missiles work.
Exactly.
We don't have, as far as we're aware, we could have military resources that we don't know about. But as far as we're aware right now, we do not have a defense missile system against this.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that China's gonna nuke LA tomorrow. Personally, but the fact that they're able to means that our way of life is
severely threatened. Because what happens when you see a China push around a smaller nation like Taiwan, and we know that they could take out one of our major cities? We are now going to think twice about standing up for what's right, about standing up for democracy, prosperity, and freedom.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in a world where the ones that are standing up for the human rights and the right to the right to property, the right to own your own labor. These are all things. China believes in slavery. China is holding a million Uyghur Muslims right now.
I think they have slaves.
And forcing. They have slaves. They are literally doing organ harvesting, and people all over the world are going there. They're literally. That's very debatable right now, but there's a lot of substantial evidence that they are literally killing the poor and selling organs to very rich people all around the world. This is not a regime that is practicing values of humanity. I don't want to live in a world where we have to be, you know, second guess what we're going to do when it
Yeah,
comes to push
exactly.
back against a nation like this.
Like currently, or at least in the past, I don't know, 50 to 60 years, we've been the strongest country,
Right.
and that's a good thing because we've been able to stand up for the smaller people, the people that are
Yes.
being bullied. We've been able to stop bullies, right?
Right.
Like Saddam Hussein, right?
Right.
And we can put an end to those dictatorships. And I wish we'd do that more. But once that gets taken away from us, and the strongest person is the bully,
Right.
what can we do? We just cower at the bully and suck it up and die.
Right. And that's not the world I want to live in. And for anybody who even says, "Oh, well, what do we care? I care about my own lifestyle. I care about what I can have here." I would even say you have to be careful about that because our entire way of life, the prosperity and the freedom that we have here, is literally on the backs of the United States military.
Yeah.
Our economy that we have, the most powerful economy, it's no coincidence that is backed by the most powerful military. The idea for people to take risk and invest comes with the idea that they believe their property is going to be protected, that they believe that a China or another major nation isn't going to come in and wipe them out. That is why, and that's also protected all the Western democracies all over the world. That's why they're able to grow, how we're able to grow. It's on the backs of the peace that the U.S. military brings to the world.
Yeah, and I know that sounds counterintuitive, peace that a military brings, but it's true.
Right.
The peace comes from having the bigger stick, right?
Right. It does.
So nobody's gonna mess with you if you have the
Right.
bigger stick, and essentially you have peace.
Absolutely.
You just want the right person to have the big stick.
Right. Yeah, well, you want the people that believe in human rights, and
Exactly.
I think that as flawed as the United States has been, it is moral superiority far beyond anybody else who has ever held the top-ranking military in the world.
In
And we have,
history, right?
and throughout history, and I'm not comparing the U.S. to utopia because utopia doesn't exist. I'm comparing it to world history, and I don't want to say that the United States is utopia. I want to say that it's a damn good country and has provided really, really great things for the whole world.
We don't sack cities and rape all the women and children, right?
Right.
So like they used to do several hundred years ago. So
Right.
that's a big improvement.
Right. We look at what we did in Afghanistan, and we had liberated. Now we pulled out of that. That's disappointing. We did a whole show on that. But this is a nation that did its best to liberate, and I'm not saying they've been perfect in every circumstance and situation, but overall the political goals were to liberate
Yeah.
whenever we've
Freedom.
gone in, not to colonize. The United States has had issues where we can take out circumstances and say that maybe this was colonization. When it
In
came
what
to the
case?
full. Well, I guess what you could say, when we had our original 13 colonies and then spreading south and west and all that, you could say that that was colonization. But
Wasn't
they
that
weren't.
diplomatic?
Right. Well, we could get in that whole debate, which we should do a show on. The
Yeah,
fact
I'd have
that
to
they
look more at the
weren't
history.
Actually, countries, they were tribes, and we could think of that. But I'm trying to be fair to the argument.
I see what
on
you're
the other
saying. I
side.
see what you're saying.
Um,
That's a good topic to discuss one
Right,
day.
and we should do a whole show on that actually. But I just want to say, who do we want running the world? Who do we want influencing the world? Because if the United States loses this standard, let me tell you, it's not Europeans who are going to step up and be the military might. Europeans don't spend militarily. Why? Or they do spend, but they don't spend very much. They can't actually protect themselves. They're relying on the United States. If you lose the United States, the entire Western world is going to be bowing to China.
I don't think.
Who do you want influencing the world?
I can't think of any other countries or areas that would rise up and defend democracy. Like I can't think of any South American countries, African countries, Middle Eastern countries. I mean, Middle Eastern countries, not all of them, but some of them, such as Iraq and Afghanistan, are pushing for the same values that China is.
Right.
So what country is going to stand up and take the place of the United States to stand up to communism and
Right.
and totalitarianism? It has to be us,
Right.
and that's why we have to continue to push for a strong a military and
Right.
not back down in that sense.
Right.
And speaking of, well, actually, this is not the best transition because we are nothing like China.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the Chinese people have to do whatever the government tells them.
Right.
And that's kind of, it's not what it's like here.
Right.
But with this whole vaccine mandate thing is
Right.
what's worrying me.
Right.
I saw a video the other day of
It's opening the door.
Yeah, I saw a video the other day of a guy. He was taking an Instagram video of himself like this, and he's holding a piece of paper that says, "I do this under duress
Right.
because I need to support my family, which I supported for the last 14 years or something like that," as he's
Right.
getting a
Right.
vaccine. And that to me was so sad. And not the fact that he's getting a vaccine, the vaccine is good and I think it helps people, but it's the fact that he doesn't want to and he has to
Right.
because if he doesn't, he can't support his family. And I'm not in a position like that. Like, yeah, I own a home, I have a wife, right? And it would suck for me to like not be able to support that, but
Right.
I don't have the same level of responsibility. I'll find a way.
Right.
But imagine this guy, who knows how many kids he has? He have 3 kids,
Right.
a house. He's living paycheck to paycheck. He literally has no choice. To him, it is just easier, and let's just get it over with and get this vaccine and succumb to the pressure
Right.
and just get the vaccine so that I can continue to support my family. Because if I stand up for what's right and I stand up for what I believe in, that doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
And that to me is just so sad that you have to do what the government tells you. You don't have the right to decide for yourself.
Right. And I do want to just say some things that have made me feel very confident in the American way, because I do want to say that I do believe no matter what's going on in this world, in this country, and this world have seen much more horrific times. There was a quote from Abraham Lincoln saying that we were still the best hope. And that gives you an idea that even back then in the 1800s, this idea of this American experiment and limited government and freedom was under threat back then, far greater than it is now. And America and Abraham Lincoln said that the United States is still the best hope. I believe those words ring true today, and evidence of it is the Southwest Airlines. The pilots are banding together and saying, well, if you're going to have to, there's not all of them are coming together saying that they're going to fire
Yeah.
all of us, but there's a large amount of them saying, well, then you have to fire all of us. They're
Well,
unionizing together, and they are pushing back. Southwest is now pulling back their mandates.
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And
They
I am
reversed.
so encouraged that we live in a country where that is still a possibility, that it is the American way. That is the thing that has pushed this country ahead in the past, and it will do it again today if we stay united.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, money is what talks, right?
Sure.
Companies are after money,
Yeah.
and not because they're greedy, but literally in their nature. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Human
Because
beings, it's human nature. Profit drives us.
even don't think of companies as humans. Just think of companies as entities that are literally like their goal is money. It just doesn't work without it, right?
They can't exist without a profit.
Exactly, 'cause the company would collapse. So at the end of the day, you have the shareholders, right? And the shareholders, the majority shareholders have a board, and the board
Right.
hires a CEO. If the CEO is doing a bad job, the board fires him. What does a bad job mean? It means not producing income.
Right.
And if they're not producing income, why does they get fired? Because then the shareholders aren't making their money, and the shareholders stop investing, and the value goes down. It's very simple. It
Right.
needs money. And when these pilots band together
Right.
and decide to not work and a bunch of flights get canceled, well, that's money.
Right.
It's money that's going down. So at the end of the day, the company has to make a decision, right? As ethical as companies love to be and seem and whatever, and I think that there are times when companies have definitely been ethical above profit.
Right.
At the end of the day, money is what drives it, and I just think it's a great thing. Like I was very worried for like a lot of things happening in the country, but like you said, seeing those pilots band together,
Right.
really gives me encouragement and hope. I
Right.
just hope that that doesn't happen for an unjust cause, like they
Right.
band together for something bad.
Right.
But usually, when people put their minds together, it's for a good cause, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to do a quick shout out to the Seattle Police Department. I don't know if anybody's seen on social media, they are actually draping the "Don't Tread on Me" flags over their police cruisers.
Why is that?
They are being mandated the vaccine, and they are resisting, and they're pushing back. And they're actually in a very strong negotiating stage, because they did so much defund the police, which I will say is nonsense and horrific that they would do that in the city of Seattle. And we saw that Chaz Chop, the independent country that grew up over 4 or 6 city blocks, which had no police presence, and
Yeah,
was
that's crazy.
racketeering, and people died in there. A 14-year-old died in there. That was the direct result of this defund the police movement.
Yeah.
And they're still suffering from that. So right now they're at the point where there's 1,000 officers who are saying they're refusing the vaccine. Now the city is coming to terms with they're not in a position where they can get rid of 1,000 officers because they've done so many cuts. They're actually moving now back in the direction where they're probably going to, put more money into the police department than they had before.
Yeah.
And I think that they're in a very strong position, so we're going to be very interested to see what happens over the next couple of days. So we stand with the Seattle Police Department.
And usually the "Don't Tread on Me" flag tells like people that aren't aware of a situation. They're usually like, oh, this guy's just an angry Republican, or and that's usually what they think when they see it, and they're like, oh, this guy's a warrior or whatever.
Yeah.
He's probably like a QAnon or whatever. That's probably what they think.
Right.
But I would say that everything has its context, and in this case, the context is let us have our freedom, right? We'll get the vaccine if we want to get the vaccine, but don't force us.
Right.
So I mean, I don't like to think of it as, me personally, as refusing a vaccine, but rather refusing to be forced
Right.
to have a vaccine, which
Right.
I just find it so incredibly immoral that someone
And
can force you.
unconstitutional.
And I know there's a big argument that goes around. Well, like, you were vaccinated as a child, and you need your vaccines to go to school as a child.
Those are state mandates and not federal mandates.
And even still, like, I was a child. Like, I didn't choose that. I'm not saying that I wouldn't, but I didn't make the choice. My parents did. And like, you don't have to go to public school. You can go to a private school, or you can be homeschooled or whatever. There are many ways, but like, not with this.
Right.
There are no jobs. I mean, not that there are no jobs. There are jobs, but most jobs don't require you to have vaccines. Like, I didn't get my smallpox test and
Right.
and all those tests to be hired where I currently work, and neither did my dad and a bunch of other places. But now they're being mandated to get a COVID vaccine.
Right.
So it's like, it's at that point, right?
Right.
So I'd say that argument is invalid.
Right. I would too.
Because the argument is valid for health purposes. Like, yeah, we got all these vaccines and they were fine, like nothing happened to us, so this one is probably safe too, which is what I think. But I'm talking about them from the mandate standpoint, right?
Right.
So I know we are at 32 minutes now,
Yeah.
but I'm really passionate about the vaccine topic specifically because it's what affects us most currently.
Right.
Everything else will affect us in the long run, but this
Right.
is current. I know
Right.
my dad's company just passed a mandate that everyone has to be vaccinated by, I think, November or January. I don't remember, or else they're gonna get let go.
Right.
So it's just horrible. Like, it sucks to see this, but that's it for me. That's all I have to say.
Right. So anybody else have any topics for the show? Want to come join us on the show? Please direct message either one of us. Feel free to call in next time. We'll be broadcasting again live in exactly 2 weeks. If something very, very pending comes up, we'll do another special.
We'll put you right here in front of our logo.
Always available. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here today. Please like and share with friends, family, even people that you don't like. But this is the Doug and Fur Show.
Especially people you don't like. All right, signing off. Bye.